The vents never whispered. Not really. They hissed, whirred, and clicked. Sometimes they groaned. But what Cale heard that night, deep in sublevel D where even shadows felt rusted, was not a noise made by machines. "Please, open the door." A voice. Barely louder than his own breath. It faded into the dull hum of the filtration shafts overhead, almost as if the metal itself had exhaled the words. Cale Orion paused, one hand gripping the worn handle of his toolbox. His eyes narrowed. He didn't call out, years working maintenance had taught him not to talk to shadows. But he turned, scanning the long corridor behind him. Nothing moved. Only the blinking lights of broken security strips and flickering overhead panels. He checked his task sheet again. It sent him to inspect a thermal inconsistency in Storage Bay 7A, a sector listed as inactive for over a decade. It had been mothballed after the last reorganization by the Overia Union, the dominant alien tech faction that ran this floating research habitat. He shouldn't have heard anything. Not here. Not now. The voice came again. Clearer. Sadder. Closer. "Human, please. They left me in the dark. I don't want to disappear." Cale froze. The voice wasn't just speaking. It was feeling. There was weight in those words, something heavy, like exhaustion laced with fear. He looked around again. Nothing. Just stale air and a long row of sealed doors, most without markings. One of the doors, however, stood out. It had no panel. No access pad. Just smooth silver alloy etched with faint ridges, like veins of starlight. It hummed, almost imperceptibly. Cale swallowed. Every survival instinct told him to walk away. Report the anomaly. Let someone with rank or armor deal with it. But he didn't move. Not right away. He looked at the door. Then back at the vent above. He took a single step forward. He wasn't brave. Not really. He hadn't fought in the outer reaches like some of the other humans stationed here. He didn't wear a badge or carry a pulse blade. He fixed things, wiring, pipes, climate regulators, even food printers when no one else bothered. He didn't do dangerous. Not until now. Another whisper. They come at shift change. I won't last another cycle. Cale's hand shook as he opened his toolkit. He pulled out his personal scanner, a beaten handheld he'd modified to read alien encryption layers. He pressed it against the smooth door. Restricted. Level 9 access only. Violation equals termination. Well. That settled it. He should absolutely leave. Instead, he sat down in front of the door. He stared at the scanner, recalibrated the pulse frequency, and began a slow override. He didn't think about what he was doing. Thinking meant questioning. And questioning meant walking away. Maybe it was the voice. Maybe it was how human it sounded, not in language, but in emotion. It wasn't artificial. It wasn't recorded. Whoever was speaking was scared. Cale had known that feeling. Abandoned. Forgotten. Trapped. Click. The scanner flashed green. The door hissed open. Only a sliver. But it was enough. Blue light poured out, cold and strange, washing over his skin like frost. He stepped inside, toolbox forgotten. The room smelled like ozone and dust. It was larger than he expected. Circular. Domed. The walls were lined with dormant monitors and humming equipment, much of it alien. He recognized a few components, bioreaders, DNA centrifuges, atmospheric calibrators, but their configurations were nothing like standard Overii labs. At the center was a containment cage. Not bars. Not steel. But light. A soft white shimmer surrounded a raised platform. And there, curled into a shape too still to be sleeping, was her. Kale stopped breathing. She wasn't human. But she wasn't anything else he could name. Her skin was the color of moonstone, blue at first glance, but silver when the light shifted. Her hair was white. Not pale blonde, not bleached, but actual white, like starfire. Long, tangled, almost to her waist. She wore a loose garment, barely more than a shift, torn at the edges. Her body was marked in strange patterns, some glowing faintly. Some looked like scars. Others looked, printed. Like symbols placed there by machines. She was curled tightly, as if her limbs hurt to move. And her eyes, when they opened, were the most haunting thing he had ever seen. Soft gray. Not blank. Not hostile. Just tired. "You're human," she said. Kale took a hesitant step forward. Yeah. Her voice had shape now. Not a whisper through the vents. Not a plea. Just presence. "What's your name?" he asked, before realizing how stupid it sounded. She sat up, slowly, the motion labored. "Cereal," she said. It rolled off her tongue like wine through shattered glass. Beautiful and broken. He looked around the chamber. Monitors tracked her vitals, heart rate, brain waves, molecular rhythm. Others displayed genetic algorithms, sequences he couldn't read, except one label that repeated in sharp ovarii text. Specimen, seed vector 014. He didn't understand most of it. But he understood cages. And he understood fear. "Why are you in there?" Cereal's eyes dimmed. "Because I'm different." Kale stepped closer. The shimmer at the edge of the force field buzzed softly. A warning. Different how? She didn't answer. Not immediately. Then she looked up. "My resonance, it matches others. Not just biologically. Emotionally. Neurologically. They say I can adapt to anyone. That I could be the key to unifying cross-species codes. Or enhancing them." Her voice cracked. "But it hurts. Every time they test me. Every sample they take. I lose something." Kale clenched his jaw. He didn't need a full picture. The truth was in the trembling of her hands, in the way her body curled away from the light, in the way her voice flinched at words like test. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't need to. "What do they want from you now?" he asked. "They'll take the core resonance next," she whispered. "It's the final sequence. The one that makes me, me." Kale felt cold. "When?" "Tomorrow. After shift rotation." He looked at the panels. No controls nearby. No release switch. The cage was probably tied to central AI. Maybe even off-grid. Designed to keep even the most dangerous subjects in permanent stasis. Except she wasn't dangerous. She was dying. Kale stepped back, breath shallow. He shouldn't be here. He should run. Instead, he said, "I'll come back." Her eyes widened slightly. Why? He didn't know. He just did. He turned and left. Outside, the hall felt darker. The vent whispered again. But this time, it wasn't lonely. Back in his bunk, Kale stared at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, her hands, the thin lines on her skin that weren't born but placed. She'd said they hurt her. That she'd be gone tomorrow. He couldn't let that happen. Not to anyone. He opened his console. Accessed the restricted blueprints of sublevel D. There, behind the walls, were old ducts. Abandoned waste lines. Vents that hadn't seen use since before he arrived. He traced a route. He found a blind spot. He made a plan. Then he pulled out a tiny wrapped object from under his bunk, a dried fruit bar from Earth, saved for a special day. He'd never had one since arriving. Maybe tomorrow was the day. That night, he returned. Serial looked weaker. Kale approached the shimmer again, slower this time. He held out the bar through the light, it stopped just before the field. He built a small hook using his multi-tool, extended it past the edge, and let it drop in. She looked at the bar like it was treasure. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know." She took it slowly. Ate it slower. Then looked at him like she'd never seen kindness before. He sat on the cold floor outside the cage. And they talked. Not much. But enough. He learned she'd been taken from her people as a child. That she didn't remember what her sky looked like. That her songs had been erased. That her name was the last thing she owned. And that he was the first person in years to speak it aloud. When the red lights flickered overhead, Kale stood quickly. Security sweep. He turned to go. But she called his name. Kale. He looked back. "Don't forget me." His throat tightened. "I won't." Then he ran. Back into the dark. Back into silence. But this time, his heart was louder than the vents. They always came after third shift. Silent, efficient, faces hidden behind silver masks. They didn't speak to her. Not anymore. Just approached with their gloved hands and quiet machines. Needles. Probes. Sensors that pierced her skin like ice. They called it harvesting. She called it dissolving. Each session took something from her. A memory, a sensation, a note from a song she once knew but could no longer remember. It was like slowly forgetting how to be alive. Until the human came. Kale. She didn't know his name until later, but she remembered the way he looked at her. Not with curiosity, not with revulsion. He looked like someone who had seen sadness before and recognized it now in someone else. When he first opened the door, she thought it was a trick. Another test. Another illusion to measure her neurological reaction to false freedom. They'd done that before. Simulated escape. It made the data more real. But the way he stared, awkward, hesitant, nervous, it wasn't performance. It was kindness. And that had been absent here for so long she barely recognized it. She watched him now, curled in the corner of the force cage, asleep. He had come back. That meant something. Not even the handlers came back after hours. They fed her on a schedule. Sedated her for tests. Ignored her requests for light, warmth, music. Anything human. But he came back. He brought her food. Not synthetic nutrient gel, but real food. Dry and chewy. Full of taste. He had asked for her name. And she had given it. Not because she wanted to, but because he had given his in return. No scientist ever did that. No one had called her by name in over 3 years. Not since they had assigned her the designation, Seed Vector 014. That became her name in the logs, in the injections, in the test records. Subject awake. Subject unstable. Subject compatible. But Kale had whispered "serial" like it was something sacred. She remembered that word, sacred. In her language, it meant, the part of me they cannot take. She shifted slowly in her cage. Movement had become difficult. The last harvest had gone deeper. They'd extracted a full gram of hemogenetic serum, and her body hadn't recovered yet. Her arms still ached, muscles twitching under skin that glowed when she was afraid. And she was afraid now. Afraid because something inside her had shifted. Not her DNA. Not her resonance. Her hope. It stirred again, slowly, like a breeze in a sealed room. Because of him. She remembered when she was taken. It had been a quiet evening on her homeworld. A world of thin oceans and humming winds, where the ground was pale and soft and the people sang to one another instead of speaking. She had been young. Not a child. Not fully grown. She remembered walking alone near the mountain pools. Her skin had shimmered in the sun. She'd just completed her first harmonization, an ancient rite of her people where they opened their minds to the rhythm of another soul. Hers had been with an elder named Sci-Fi, a mentor and poet. He had cried when their harmonization completed. "You feel everything too deeply," he had said. "The universe will hurt you, but it will also sing to you louder than the stars." He had been right. But she never got the chance to find out why. The sky had opened. Ships descended. The Overii took her. Told her she was chosen. Special. Valuable. But they never once asked what she wanted. In her cage, she watched Kale breathe. He snored softly. It made her smile. How strange. To smile. Even now. She moved closer to the edge of the cage. It buzzed faintly against her skin, warning her not to get too close. He had asked her how long she had. She told him, 1 cycle. 1 more session. They would take the core. Resonance strand alpha. The part of her that allowed her DNA to link with others, biologically, emotionally, spiritually. The part that let her harmonize with another being. Her people believed it was sacred. The Overii believed it was profitable. But if they took it, she would not survive. Her cells would collapse, and she would stop. No afterlife. No memory. Just stillness. Kale had clenched his fists when she told him. Not out of anger. But helplessness. That, too, was kindness. Her fingers traced a mark on her wrist. A burn from a past experiment. Kale had asked what made her so special. And she had almost laughed. She wasn't special. She had become valuable. There's a difference. Value is something others assign to you. Based on what you can give. What you can provide. Special is something you carry alone, without needing to prove it. But he had looked at her like she was special. And that had stirred something inside her she hadn't felt in years. Something warm. They'd shared silence for an hour now. She could hear his heart. Not literally, but her resonance, though weakened, still allowed her to feel the subtle rhythm of his emotions. He was scared. Not of her. For her. He didn't know she could feel it. Most couldn't. Even the scientists barely understood the sensory field she emitted. But his fear made her feel safe. What irony. Her thoughts drifted back to the first time she'd used her resonance. Before the Overii. Before the cage. It had been with Sci-Fi, during the rite. He had placed his palm over hers. Closed his eyes. Let the frequencies align. For one breathless moment, she had felt everything he felt, his age, his sorrow, his wisdom. And he had felt her youth, her confusion, her raw and wild longing. He had smiled, and said, "You will love deeply, and it will hurt. But it will be worth it." She hadn't understood. But now, maybe she did. Because looking at Kale, curled up on the floor like a wounded star, she felt something raw and terrifying rise in her chest. Something like love. And it did hurt. But it was already worth it. He woke before the next sweep. Blinked up at her. Smiled sleepily. "You didn't sleep," he murmured. "I don't sleep much anymore," she replied. He sat up, stretching. Rubbed his eyes. "I found a way into the systems." Her heart skipped. "A way to open the cage?" "No," he admitted. "Not yet. But I found a maintenance shaft under this chamber. If I can shut down the cage's core regulator for even 10 seconds. He trailed off. She tilted her head. "You could get me out." He nodded. She didn't respond immediately. Part of her wanted to say don't risk it. Part of her wanted to tell him it's not worth your life. But another part whispered something else. Let him try. So she said, what do you need from me? Cale blinked. What? What do I do? He hesitated, then smiled. Stay alive. She watched him go again. Watched the shimmer seal behind him. And this time, she felt something dangerous. Hope. The hallway stank of plasma coolant and recycled air. Nixon Vale strode down it with practiced indifference, one hand resting on his hip just inches from the pulse baton he never actually used. A pair of officers passed him in the opposite direction, tall, ovari-bred hybrids with faceless helmets and perfect stride alignment. They didn't acknowledge him. They never did. He was human. Tolerated, but replaceable. He liked it that way. Being ignored gave him space to think. And lately, thinking had become dangerous. He scanned his data slate. Another thermal fluctuation in sub-level D, third report this week. Once or twice would have been nothing, outdated tech always glitched, but 3 was a pattern. And Nixon hated patterns. Patterns meant someone was doing something they shouldn't. He leaned against the control panel at the junction of Corridor 4G. This was deep territory. Mostly forgotten. The walls here still had the old Terran markings from before the Ovaria Union bought out the station and renamed every section into incomprehensible strings of consonants. He'd been down here before. Once, with Cale. The memory hit sharper than he liked. 2 years ago. Cale had been new. Nervous. Too kind for this place. Always helping people who didn't deserve it. Always asking why things worked instead of just fixing them. They'd ended up in this corridor, laughing over a busted vent that had sprayed foam across Nixon's boots. Cale had offered to clean it. Nixon had leaned against the wall and said, "Don't bother, they'll just rot again anyway." Cale had smiled. A real smile. Nixon hadn't seen one since. He checked the maintenance logs. Someone had bypassed a level 9 security panel last night. Successfully. Someone with a level 2 clearance. Cale. It had to be. No one else down here had the knowledge, or the stupidity. Nixon leaned his head against the cool metal wall. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered under his breath. He could have reported it. He should have. Protocol said any unauthorized breach of restricted containment warranted immediate lockdown. Especially near 7A. But he didn't press the alert. Not yet. Instead, he took a detour. The door wasn't hard to find. The residue from Cale's scanner patch was still faintly visible, heat stamped onto the smooth surface like a signature. Nixon stood in front of it for a long time. Debating. Then he overrode the lock. He shouldn't have. But he did. The room was cold. Too cold. Like a morgue, but humming. He stepped inside. The containment field at the center still pulsed gently. And within it, curled on the platform, was something that shouldn't have been real. She looked like a dream dying slowly. Her skin shimmered in the half-light. Her hair was a soft tangle of white. Not bleached. Not artificial. Natural. Eyes closed. Breathing shallow. Nixon froze. He wasn't supposed to feel anything. But something cracked under his ribs. Is this what Cale saw? She shifted, sensing him. Eyes opened. Gray. Ancient. Alive. Not threatening. Just tired. He stepped back, hand moving toward his baton without thinking. "Who are you?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "You're not him." His jaw tightened. "You mean Cale?" She nodded. "He's different." Nixon felt a stab of something he couldn't name. Jealousy? Guilt? He's breaking every rule for you. She didn't deny it. And you're letting him, he said. Still no answer. Just a look. Not judgmental. Just knowing. He couldn't take it. He turned and walked out. Back in the security lounge, he sat for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Cale. Stupid, bright-eyed Cale. Always trying to fix things that weren't broken. Or maybe they were. He watched the playback. Cale entering the chamber. Bringing food. Talking. Staying. Smiling. No security officer. No scientist. No alien had ever treated Subject 014 like that. He'd seen the vids before. The way the researchers poked her, ignored her tears, treated her body like a question and her mind like an obstacle. But Cale didn't look at her like a subject. He looked at her like a person. Nixon clenched his fists. He didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was old affection that had never fully died. But that night, he called up an encrypted channel. One that didn't belong to the Overii. He stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute before typing 3 words. It's happening again. He didn't sign it. But they'd know it was him. They always did. He didn't sleep. Just stared out his window at the faint glow of the stars beyond the station. He used to believe in the system. Believed humans had a place in the new union, even if it wasn't high-ranking. But now, he wasn't sure what he believed. He watched the stars and remembered the look in Cale's eyes the day he first saw him smile. He wondered if he'd ever look at him like that. The next morning, security went on partial lockdown. Someone had tripped an alert near Sector 7A. Someone had been caught trying to disable a force cage. Nixon arrived too late to catch them. But not too late to see the signs of escape. The shimmer was gone. The cage empty. The door pried open from the inside. On the floor, a metal hook. And a human tool. Cale's. Nixon didn't report it. Not immediately. Instead, he pulled the surveillance logs and deleted the last 2 hours. An unauthorized move. One that would cost him everything if traced. But he didn't care. Not yet. He walked back into the empty room and stood where she had once been. Closed his eyes. And whispered, "Run, you idiot." Because for once, he wanted to see someone break the rules and live. The cargo manifest was a lie. Which was fine, so was she. Lyris Thea leaned back in the pilot chair of the Trillium Ghost, boots propped up against the console as the ship hummed under her like a coiled animal. The crate labeled "atmospheric filters" was actually filled with black market protein cultures. The antique microprocessors were stolen from a decommissioned Terran outpost. And the encrypted transmission she'd intercepted 2 hours ago. That was the real reason she hadn't turned the Ghost around. Not yet. She pulled the recording up again. Listened closely. "My name is Serial. I was taken because of what I carry in my blood. But I am more than DNA." Lyris sat forward, heart skipping. The voice was soft. Worn thin. But real. And familiar. Years ago, on the edge of the Kavara collapse, a dying resistance fighter had once whispered to her, "There's a girl locked on the Union's back labs, they call her the Resonance Key. If we had her, we could shut down the whole program, she could link species. Unite us all." She hadn't believed it then. Now she wasn't so sure. The station wasn't on any public map. Standard for a genetics lab funded by the Overii Union. But smugglers had maps the official charts didn't. Lyris rerouted her jump drive to skim the edge of the station's heat signature without triggering an approach alert. She watched from the dark, a speck of her ship orbiting a giant, humming machine lit with blue veins. She sipped a thin cup of synthetia and wondered what the hell she was about to do. She was a courier. A traitor. A liar with fast hands. Not a rescuer. But the voice haunted her. It wasn't the words. It was the truth inside them. The way Serial had said, someone will remember. Lyris remembered. She remembered everyone the Union had ever buried. And maybe, just this once, she could do more than survive. Maybe she could fight. She started with the comms array. The station ran on autocycles. Every 4 shifts, the outer antenna rotated. That was her window. She slipped the ghost between the spin cycles and jammed the upper transponder. Within 30 seconds, the station thought its own uplink had failed. It would self-correct in 5 minutes. She needed 2. Just enough to fire a shortwave burst to the lab's emergency access grid. Just enough to find them. The scan came back fast. 2 lifeforms, moving through sublevel corridors. 1 human. 1 irregular. Not a prisoner. Not anymore. They were running. Lyris grinned. Of course you broke out. She tapped into the backup systems and rerouted power from the waste incinerators, old trick. Bought her another 6 minutes of confusion on their end. Then she patched through a proximity ping. Short. Sharp. Just enough to catch their attention. If you're hearing this, keep moving. I'm close. Don't die until I find you. The lower port was half-wrecked. Good. She liked a bit of chaos. Lyris landed the ghost with barely enough clearance. The heat signature alone would trip sensors across the station's central core, but she didn't care anymore. This wasn't stealth. This was war. She sprinted into the docking tunnel, pulse pistol in one hand, motion reader in the other. Kale. She remembered him now, one of the humans who'd bought tools from her on a resupply run. Soft-spoken. Nervous. Honest, which made him rare. He wasn't a fighter. But someone like him, risking his life for a myth. It made her believe in him more than the myth. Then she saw them. 2 figures in the smoke. The girl shimmered like frost in starlight. And the boy, Kale, held her like something breakable, eyes wide and desperate. Serial. Lyris called out. They both froze. Kale raised the pulse gun, shaking, untrained. She raised her hands. Easy. I'm here to help. You don't know me, but I've heard your voice. And I believe you. Serial's gaze pierced hers. Why would you help? Lyris smiled. Because you're real. And because I'm tired of pretending that the universe doesn't need someone like you. The security bots came fast. Metal claws scraping. Boots pounding. Kale fired. Missed. Lyris dropped 2 bots in 5 seconds flat. Nice gun, Kale muttered. She winked. Yours now. I brought a better one. They ran. The ghost was hot and ready. Serial collapsed the moment they crossed the threshold, eyes dimming. Kale caught her. I need her alive, Lyris said. He didn't respond with words, just cradled her like something holy. The door sealed behind them. Lyris gunned the engines and launched the ship before the bots reached the tunnel. Behind them, the station lit with alarms. Containment breach. Pursuit. Let them come. Serial slept for 14 hours. Lyris didn't blame her. Kale stayed at her side the whole time. He never slept. Barely moved. Just held her hand, whispered to her sometimes. Lyris watched it all from the co-pilot's seat. She'd seen desperation before. But not like this. This was love. Not shiny or sweet. Just stubborn. And true. When Serial finally woke, her voice was a rasp. Where are we? Kale leaned down. Safe. For now. Serial blinked. The girl. Kale turned. Lyris stepped forward. I'm Lyris. Smuggler. Former coward. Full-time idiot. She smiled. You hijacked my conscience with a broadcast, so I figured I'd return the favor and hijack your escape. Serial's laugh was dry, broken, but real. Thank you. Lyris nodded. I've got a place we can go. It's not much, dead moon, old outpost, barely breathable air, but it's quiet. And no union tags. Kale looked at Serial. She nodded once. That was enough. Later, Lyris sat in the cargo hold alone. The stars drifted by. She'd helped them escape. She'd done something good. And it scared the hell out of her. Because now she cared. Now she believed in something again. Not the myth. Not even the science. But in them. A human. A resonance-bonded girl. Both broken. Both surviving. Together. And in the silence of the void, the old resistance comm crackled once. A single message. We heard the signal. And that was all Lyris needed to smile.